So welcome everybody to Youthquake, and I'm really happy to be here and really excited to host. My name is Hannah Alper, and I'm a youth activist in BBYO, and this just seems really fitting to be happening on JServe, which is BBYO's Day of Service. So I first want to talk about the Diller Teen Tikkun Olam Awards, and that's all of the people joining me today are recipients of it, so it's incredible. The Diller Teen Tikkun Olam Awards honor Jewish teens who demonstrate remarkable leadership and engagement in projects that embody the values of Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. Up to 15 recipients are awarded $36,000 each to further their project or for their education. And as you know, today is JServe, our Day of Service, and there's different amazing programs happening all day, and this is just one of them, and so I'm really excited to host this. So now I'll just give a little bio on the panelists that we have today. So Julie Averbach, do you want to give a little wave? There we go. Julie Averbach is the creator of Adventures from My World, a comic book designed to support siblings of individuals with special needs. It's awesome. As a proof of concept for comic book therapy, this resource facilitates emotional dialogue and awareness around the unique challenges this population faces. Julie wrote, edited, and produced the comic book in collaboration with student artists from the Kubert School as part of her Girl Scout Gold Award project. After printing 8,000 copies, she distributed throughout sibling support groups, hospitals, universities, and resource centers in 19 US states and 4 countries internationally. Wow. In 2016, Julie was one of 10 Girl Scouts in the United States to be recognized as a National Young Woman of Distinction. Since starting college at Yale University in 2017, she spent her time studying art history, leading her own Girl Scout troop, and developing a new college engagement strategy for Girl Scouts of the USA. Also, fun fact about Julie, she's a BBYO alum from GJHRR, Greater Jersey Hudson River Region. That was a mouthful. And now moving on to Michaela. Michaela Weinstein co-founded Speak. Speak is a student group providing a unique curriculum that teaches empathy and social justice to 5th grade students. This was founded after a series of racist, anti-Semitic, and sexist incidents occurred at her school. The program offers 2 tiers of student membership for high schoolers who facilitate classroom presentations and design curriculum. In coordination with Speak's leadership group, Michaela has created presentation lesson plans for her school district, whose teachers and principals approve the program to facilitate over 100 presentations. Speak's curriculum can be accessed around the globe to give other educators resources to combat intolerance in their communities. Michaela has moved towards working to reform California's education system after realizing that the issues in her own district were partly caused by a lack of funding for school districts across the state. She now works with student school board members through the platform of Evolve CA, an organization advocating for ending corporate loopholes in education funding. Michaela is also a BBYO alum from CRW Central Region West. So thank you so much, and I know that those were both really big bios, but these 2 women are absolutely incredible and do amazing things, so I'm really excited to have both of you. So thank you so much for coming on and for joining us and for helping inspire us. So if you could both start by telling us about the projects that you received the Diller Teen Tikkun Alum Award for. What do they do? What inspired you to start them? And what impact have they had to you and to the community?
You can go first, Julie.
Okay. So hi, everyone. I'm Julie. Feel free to drop in questions in the chat or speak up at any point if you have questions about what I'm saying. But as you heard, I developed a comic book called Adventures from My World to support special needs siblings. If we want to pull up some pages of the comic book, I know we can screen share to give you a sense of what it looks like. I think that might be helpful in talking about my project. But basically what this project came out of was my experience as a special needs sibling. So when I was around 4 years old, my sister was diagnosed on the autistic spectrum. And through my experience in being very involved in the special needs community throughout my whole life, I observed that in a lot of families, the parents dedicated so many resources to the children who had special needs in their families that the emotional needs of the other siblings tended to get overlooked. So I really set out to create a resource that would help to highlight the perspective of this very historically underrepresented population and to bring light to some of their challenges. So my decision to make the comic book was also based on what I was reading at the time. So I don't know if people are familiar with the graphic novel Persepolis, but it's about a young girl's perspective on the Iranian Revolution. And so I was reading that in my 9th grade English class, and that really got me thinking about the potential of the comic book medium to really facilitate empathy and emotional dialogue. So that's really where this project came from. And so I ended up recruiting art students to translate my drawings into the more professional format that you see on your screens. And from there, I printed 8,000 copies and distributed them both across the US and internationally. And through this process, what's been, I think, the most gratifying part for me has been seeing how siblings have been able to tap into this resource to open up about things that are really hard to talk about. So in some cases, they can point to a character in a story and say, this is how I'm feeling. I feel like this character, and that kind of allows them to talk about their hardships they may not be motivated to otherwise. So that is in a nutshell what my project was. Thanks for pulling it up on the screen.
That's incredible. And I love that it's really all about helping people that are affected by that, especially because there's probably not a lot of resources. Yeah, Michaela?
Yeah. By the way, you guys should all actually take a very deep, long look at the book because it is very cool. And Julie is a very emotionally intelligent person who put a lot of work into it, and it's a very cool book. So I recommend looking at it. Yeah, so my project, Speak, it was founded after in 9th grade, there was a couple different incidents going on at my school, and it was really disturbing for a lot of the student body to see what their peers were doing. Among those was swastikas drawn on books and lockers, and there was also a really racist and sexist Instagram account that was created by white and Asian boys from our school. And so it was really difficult for a lot of students to see their peers creating that, and especially to be targeted. And towards the end of the year, it got pretty bad after the Instagram account was created. And so a friend of mine and I joined together and decided to, bring together other students to try and make a response to what we saw going on in our district. And what we all decided, it was a group of 6 of us at first, was that this really was rooted in the fact that we didn't really have any kind of emotional awareness education in our school district. And there wasn't enough resources for teachers to be engaging their students in the way that we thought was really necessary for that type of learning to happen. And so we developed a curriculum. You can find it on our website that I'll share with you guys later. And in our curriculum, we talk about a lot of different issues ranging from anti-Semitism to racism to homophobia, sexism, misogyny, other types of hate, and then also what are the responses people have had, how can we try to relate to each other, in the best way possible, while also knowing that we're never truly going to know someone else's experience because we are all very unique. And so it was really quite an experience trying to create that curriculum, testing it out with students. We've so far had over about 100 presentations in our district with 5th grade classrooms. We're starting to move into middle school, which is really exciting. Unfortunately, that was cut short because of Corona and our schools have been closing, but we've been expanding and it's been a very exciting process. Our group has also grown quite a bit. We at first were 6 people, now I think we're around 30. And 30 kids now going around and giving these presentations. And it's also really healing to have a community of people that's willing to do that work and engage with me and other people around, how do we ensure that the younger students in our district, the next generation of students, are going to treat each other kindly and with respect and be able to empathize with each other. And so that's really the goal of my project and what we do.
I love that, especially because it's truly something that starts young, and it's an issue that a lot of us, I'm sure, can relate to, especially with anti-Semitism, even if it's kind of subtle at our own schools and in our own communities. So that's incredible. And we know that changing the world isn't easy. So what's the greatest challenge that you feel that you faced in working on your project and in your activism? how did you navigate it?
Would you like to start?
Sure. So I would say one challenge I dealt with was establishing my authority, and that I was working with a team of people who were older than I was. So one example that comes to mind is that when I first reached out to the art school that I ended up collaborating with, I basically just cold emailed a professor and said, hey, I'm a Girl Scout. I'm working on this project. Do you think that anyone might be interested in teaming up with me on this? And the professor was like, no, probably not. But I'll send out an email anyway to 30 of my students. We'll see what happens. So within a day, 8 students had sent me their portfolios to apply to work on this comic book with me, not realizing that I was like 15. And that's like the boss that they were working for. So I think that was a bit of a shock, but over time I was able to figure out how to leverage my being young and kind of bringing energy to the project. But that was something I also encountered in working with my project mentor, who is a child psychologist who is in his 30s, very arrogant, but also very experienced in his field. And I remember when I came to him with some of my stories, a lot of them are very raw and emotional and have unresolved endings. So one of the stories I was very attached to, I remember he told me to change the ending to it because it was too sad and it would make people feel hopeless reading it. And that was really tough for me because I had to kind of navigate both my own creative voice and staying authentic to myself, but also taking this insight from a mentor. So what I ended up doing was I kept the story as it was, but I added in discussion questions at the back of the comic book to facilitate conversation so that people who are reading the book could then brainstorm solutions to the situations that were presented in the stories. So that was one way that I managed to kind of navigate that relationship and stay true to myself in the process. But it's definitely not easy at all times.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I've had some other kind of similar issues in terms of how to navigate my own role in my project, and where does that begin, where does that end, and how do we make sure that we're working with other people and kind of giving up or giving out what is our authentic self and input, but also taking into account other people's input as well. And so I would say for me that manifested really when I was trying to navigate where my place, being a leader of a group that deals with social justice, and particularly social justice with race. And so navigating where my place in that was as a white leader was definitely really confusing, and there was a lot of conflict that was brought up because of that. And I think it's a really important question to dive into, and even though it's really uncomfortable, I think it is a really important topic and subject to explore. Where does my responsibility begin and end? Or maybe when is my responsibility to step down? I had to deal with, how can I structurally change the organization so that more voices are heard, particularly voices of color in the organization. So yeah, that was my main issue while I was working within Speak, is how do I navigate that? And there was also a lot of questions that came up for me, wondering like, where does my Judaism fit into that? Because 50 years ago, I would have been considered a person of color, and even today in many communities I am, but I personally identify as white, and I am white passing, and in most spaces I am considered white. And so there was a lot of confusion over where does my Judaism fit into that, and how do I need to kind of change my leadership style to really meet the needs of our group and like put my own ego behind the goals of the group. And so that was really difficult for me. And I definitely don't think I, have perfected how to deal with that. People have been dealing with that for a while, but I would say the ways that I kind of got through it was, at first I really screwed up and I didn't know what to do. And I think coming from that place of like really messing up, I definitely did learn a lot. And some of those were, one, you really have to listen, and that can be extremely difficult. You really have to listen. You have to put your ego behind you and recognize that you guys are all, we're all working towards the same goal, and that's why we're doing this. I would say a second thing is like, sometimes we are wrong, and I tend to think I'm right all the time, and I'm very opinionated. And so recognizing that I really can be wrong, and sometimes other opinions truly are right, even if they are fundamentally different than mine. I would say also, like I said, changing the structure of the organization was one way that we started to get more voices heard. And then actually having very deep, difficult conversations with people that I might have hurt, with my actions being a white leader. It sounds bad, with my actions being a leader who also is white. And so, sitting down with people and actually asking them one-on-one, I want to understand what I did, and I know that that's a difficult place to put you in, but I'm truly trying to understand like how I can develop and what I'm needing to do. So I would say that was really the biggest issue that I faced personally, and navigating that was definitely confusing. I don't think there's one, good specific way to do that. It's really particular to the situation, but definitely listening to your peers and listening to the oppressed voices around you, not putting people on the spot when you're asking for advice, but rather finding ways to let it come to you is really important.
For sure, yeah. And I think that, yeah. Oh.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Why don't we wait until the end to see if we have time for questions, and then after for sure. So I think that's really interesting. It relates to a lot of the whole, like, listen as much as you speak and speak as much as you listen. And I think that's just like really, really important. And we were talking about the Diller Teen Tikkun Olam Awards, and how did you find out about the Diller Teen Awards, and how did you receive it, and how has that really helped you further your impact?
I can start this time. How did I find out about it? Well, I was sitting down at a dinner with my grandma, and she is a very Jewish, typical grandmother. And she was like, "Oh, honey, you're so amazing. Your project is so amazing, and you should." Apply for this award. I saw it in my magazine that's for, I think, Jewish elderly people. And you should apply for this because it's such a good award, and you are so deserving of it, blah, blah, blah. And then she went on about, how amazing I was, how amazing the work I did was, blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, okay, even though it's coming from my grandma, she's a little bit biased, I'll see. So I applied. Definitely not right now, Sienna. Sienna, I'm on a panel. Can you close the door, please? Thanks. 5. That was my sister. So I applied not thinking that I was going to get it, and then I passed the first round, and I passed the second round, and then I was like, oh, okay, cool. And so that was really how I figured out about it. It was from a dinner with my grandma.
I love that, Julie.
Yeah, kind of a similar story. I'm pretty sure I heard about it through my mom. I was just kind of applying for a lot of different college scholarships and came across that one. And I would say that while the money has been very helpful in covering a lot of my college education and allowing me to distribute more comic books to nonprofits that support siblings free of charge, the most important part has been being a part of the Diller community and meeting people like Michaela, who are so inspiring, and just being surrounded by others who are very passionate about the work that they're doing and care about each other, not only for what they're doing, but also just as human beings. So that's been really wonderful. I also just wanted to say, if people have questions and they don't want to forget them, they can also drop them in the chat. Yes.
For sure, great idea. And I love that it's just like really grassroots in that, Michaela, it was a dinner with your grandma, and it just shows how real activism is and how real all those stories are. And so the bios that we talked about, they're pretty long and filled with incredible accomplishments and really like the big ones. But what's something that's not in your bio? What's something that either it's something that you're working on, or something that really just makes you feel really proud, but it's just not in there, or maybe it's a fun fact or anything like that? And also, what are you working on right now that you're really excited about?
Michaela, you go for it.
Hey, yeah, I very quickly mentioned that I work a little bit with student board members, but I would say kind of downplayed that. So a lot of my work in the past 2 years has been with student school board representatives. I myself have been one for about 2 years now. And my first year, I was completely confused. I had no clue what was going on. I didn't understand half of what went on in meetings, probably more than half of what went on in meetings. And I realized that that wasn't because I wasn't intelligent or because I didn't have, the voice to participate, but it was rather because I didn't understand the terminology of what was going on, and I didn't understand how a lot of the funding structures for California's education system worked. And so my first year, I did a lot of reading up and figured a lot out. And then I started coordinating with other student board members because I realized that my issue was not unique. Many other students had had the same problem when they were becoming student board members and going to these meetings where very complicated words are used and very complicated systems are talked about. And so I started working with other student board members and coordinating with them and working with the California Association of School Boards and California Association of Student Councils. And after that, I just created this network of, I don't know how many, maybe 50, 100 student board members throughout California. And so right now, really what I'm doing is looking for ways that I can supply online training. And how can I make sure that the trainings I'm creating, probably through the form of videos, are things that teens will actually want to listen to, because no matter how accomplished you are or what your attention span is, we don't like watching long videos that are boring. So right now my current project has been, how do I create content that student board members will be interested in and also really be able to learn something from, but aren't super long and boring. So that's kind of the current thing I've been working on.
Yeah. In my case, I would say that since starting college, I've transitioned to work on, I've still continued to work on the comic book, but I've also started up a lot of other things. So one of them is that I lead a Girl Scout troop of girls from the surrounding community. So I bring a bunch of girls, particularly girls of underserved communities around my campus, onto campus to enjoy and benefit from meal resources and kind of offer them leadership development opportunities and exposure. So that's something that I've been working on. I also I work part-time as a social media coordinator for my residential college. So I work on managing our digital platforms, and my greatest joy with that job has been taking the initiative to interview dining hall and custodial staff members from my college and kind of writing some of their stories and capturing their hobbies and interests so that students who read about them on our social media platforms can then approach people and know their names and ask them about their hobbies when they see them in the dining hall or they see a custodian around campus. So I've been enjoying that. And also this last semester, I planned a big staff appreciation holiday party with student a cappella groups, musicians, magicians, again, just bringing recognition to workers and their contributions that are often overlooked. So that's a few things I've been up to.
I love that, and that's really all about like real stories from real people, which is just so cool. And Michaela, I love everything that you were saying, in that it's, especially right now, we're all kind of adapting to this new online world, and we're all in it together. So I think that's definitely will make it easier. What's the best piece of advice that anyone's ever given you? I love asking this question.
Yeah. You're gonna have to go first for that one.
Okay, well, fortunately, I actually got this piece of advice from Diller. So here's my way of passing it forward. I think that when we think about leadership, we have this idea of what that is supposed to look like. And it's often a very romanticized ideal of leadership as being the person who's at the forefront of the movement, who has a lot of power and prominence. And I think that it's important to consider that you don't always need to invent the wheel, and you don't always need to be the person in the front starting your own thing, but rather you can often achieve a lot of impact and create a lot of value by joining existing organizations and supporting their efforts. So we should think carefully when we're starting our own project about whether that's the appropriate solution, or whether we could better use our efforts to become effective volunteers for an existing organization and really create change there. Because sometimes in creating your own project, you're duplicating an effort that already exists, and you're potentially diluting the pool of resources that could be going to another organization in that same field. So that's something to think critically about. And I think my sister is a great example of this. I talked about her a little bit earlier, but more recently, she has developed her own project in collecting 7,000 toiletry items and assembling them into kits for a local organization, and then going on runs to distribute them to local homeless populations. So she's technically a volunteer. She didn't start her own nonprofit to help the homeless, but where she is achieving the most value is in collaboration with an existing organization. So I would say that's a piece of advice that I've really taken to heart.
I'm kind of going between two, but I think I can mesh them. So the best advice that I ever received was talking about how we need to reach across the aisle. And I think that many of us are, I mean, if you're on this panel, you're probably interested in social justice, and given that we're Jewish, it probably has something to do with politics. And so I think reaching across the aisle and figuring out how you can access someone who may not agree with you, it can be really difficult and super frustrating. And I've definitely had my fair share of just like screaming at people. Probably one of my best friends, he, you know, nothing wrong with Bloomberg. Actually, there's a couple things personally, but he was talking about it and I just was so frustrated. And I started like screaming at him over FaceTime yesterday and just getting so heated and angry. And I kind of remembered what this person had said to me and I was like, okay, you know, I have to reach across the aisle. And usually when we have disagreements with people that are political, it's sometimes because the premise that we have is not the same. The kind of like basic understanding we have is not the same. And so when I was, you know, yelling at this person, one of my best friends yesterday, I started to realize that, you know, his beliefs in terms of who he voted for weren't really based on their kind of social politics, because he thought that social politics shouldn't be in the realm of presidential campaigns. And so it was kind of interesting hearing these opinions and recognizing that, you know, you shouldn't go into a conversation trying to change someone's mind, but rather go into a conversation really trying to understand what they're saying. And sometimes it can be really difficult. And personally, for me, it was incredibly difficult. And I am not a master, but going into a conversation, knowing that sometimes we aren't going to have the same opinions as people, or most of the time we aren't. And also usually there is, you know, an underlying want to have good in the world on both sides, and just people have different ways of getting there. And usually those different ways of getting there are because there's different basic understandings of, you know, of the premise of the arguments. And so it's kind of like a niche piece of advice, but it definitely has been really helpful for me, especially because more of the work I've been doing has been getting into political activism. So that's probably the advice I've gotten. Yeah, Julie?
But that's also related to the question that we got. So I don't know if you want to answer that too. About being in a group where people are insensitive, how do you raise awareness about issues without alienating yourself? So you seem to be addressing, like, how do we bring up issues that can be uncomfortable in a way that's respectful of other people's needs and understandings? So I don't know if you wanted to address that question as well.
Yeah.
Or we can give it some time and then let it simmer.
Yeah. How do we come into conversations not alienating ourselves? Yeah, that's a difficult one. I mean, a big one is going into a conversation alone and just not seeing it as this chance to change someone's mind is just incredibly important, because I think that has been really divisive. And I think also going into conversations, like I said, knowing that they also want good. Most likely if one of you guys are talking to someone, chances are they like want the best result for people, but they have different ways of getting there. So knowing that opinion is there and that like good intent is there, and kind of assuming the best is really important. And it can be hard because sometimes it's just difficult to have faith in the fact that people are good. But my experience has been that it's really important to go into those conversations really trying to listen and recognize that sometimes they have different opinions, but that's because their fundamental beliefs are quite different. And if you had the same fundamental beliefs, maybe your opinion would be slightly different on a political issue. Yeah, I don't know if you want to respond to that, Julie.
I mean, I think when broaching issues that can be difficult, especially with people you consider that may be insensitive. An important thing to keep in mind is also that we're all in the process of learning, and none of us is perfect and has fully developed right opinions. So I think that opening the conversation by talking about how, okay, I'm in the process of learning, we all are, and kind of normalizing that is a good way to open up that sort of conversation. And like Michaela was saying, I think rather than having the goal in mind of changing someone's opinion, which could likely result in them becoming more defensive and buckling down on what they believed going into that conversation, just seek to learn from each other. And, you know, even if you don't think that you're having an impact on them during the course of that conversation, maybe when they go home later in the day, a thought will pop into their mind that is relevant to what you said, and slowly you will start to make a difference in their minds. So don't expect to see the gains of that right away, but it's important work to be doing anyway.
I love that. And I would also just say, like, like educating is the most important thing. And if someone is being insensitive, it's probably just because they don't know enough about the issue. So educate them, and understanding is really at the root and the core of everything like that. So how do Jewish values really show up in everything that you do? And I'm going to add that on with the next question. And as well, how does BBYO show up in what you do? And how does BBYO and Judaism kind of impact who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I mean, Jewish values, I think that what I do with Speak, what I'm doing with California, and kind of like trying to figure out where my role is, and working with the education system and the funding structures for that education system, I would say all of it really ties into various Jewish values. One of those being Tikkun Olam, which is a central value of Diller, the Diller Teen Awards, in the name. So kind of doing work for the purpose of bettering other people's lives where it's needed. And so really working kind of where the biggest need is, and trying to use your skills or, to fit that need. So I'd say that's one of the Jewish values that I have really engaged with in my project. A second one, I think, is education. Jews are notorious for needing to find the truth and figuring it out and debating and, having long conversations until we feel like we know, the answer. And so I think education has been the root of all of my work. It's kind of been the lifeline of everything I've been doing, from Speak to where I'm at now, which is working with student board members to reform their school district and the way that education is delivered. So yeah, I mean, kind of making sure that everybody in California has access to that education has been a big part of my work. And I think that really aligns with many Jewish values, because education is so central in the communities, the Jewish communities that I've been in. I would say in particular to BBYO, I was in BBYO, I believe, kind of more concentrated in my sophomore year. And it was a time when I wasn't really sure where I was going with my work. And I was a little bit lost in terms of where do I want to move with Speak? And Speak had been just formed a couple months earlier. And so BBYO kind of came into my life when I was a little bit confused and maybe needed some community. And so I would say mainly the service that it brought to me was that community to give me the base so that I could kind of think and ponder, where do I want to go with my work? I would say, yeah, the most important part of BBYO was just the community and the people that it brought into my life.
Yeah. In a similar way, I think BBYO for me really offered me a chance to engage with other Jewish teens, where I didn't really have that chance in my school or in any other outlet or activity that I was involved with. And in terms of how my Jewish background shows up in my work, to Olam, and this sense that we need to address injustice aggressively and urgently, which I think is very particular to a Jewish framing of morality. The idea of tzedek and justice as being interconnected with tzedakah and giving has been really influential in my thinking, particularly this idea that giving is not something that we do when we feel like it or out of goodwill or charity, but is rather an obligation that we have as people who have privilege, and kind of a basic requirement of human existence is that we give when we have privilege, is something that's really meaningful to me and that I take with me when I do these projects.
That's amazing. And I totally agree about that. It truly is just a very welcoming community that embraces you and celebrates Tikkun, Olam, and Tzedakah, and that's exactly what we're doing today. Now, the world that we're living in today is unpredictable, unfamiliar, and pretty scary, especially right now. So what kind of gives you hope when things seem pretty hopeless?
I can start. So for me, something I like to think about when I'm feeling really overwhelmed is actually a Jewish proverb that goes along the lines of, the work is not yours to finish, but neither should you desist from it. So what I get from that quote is that we can take pride in the fact that we belong to a long trajectory of people who are interested in social justice and people who are reckoning with these issues and developing solutions. So we are not the first people or the last people to deal with climate change. And we probably won't see the resolution of all these issues in our lifetime. So we can kind of think about ourselves as belonging to this longer narrative. And we can even see the impact of what other people are doing within this community of change makers. And we can feel encouraged in the gains that other people have already achieved and see that there are people working on these issues and they're succeeding, and like what we're doing is actually working. So that's something that makes me feel encouraged when I'm feeling helpless in these challenging times.
Yeah. I think what I've been leaning on mostly during this time has been my central community and the friends I have, believing that, maybe there isn't actually something I can do to make it better. That can be a really difficult thing to come to, especially because I'm such a doer, and if I see a problem, I'm like, I want to get to it, and I want to see, how I can best fit my talents and abilities to that. But really right now, there's not that much that I can do. And so kind of coming to peace with the fact that I just have to, stay home and recognize that my role is not as big as I would like it to be, or I can't make as much change as I would like it to be specific to right now. But really the best I can do is lean on the people that I know and love, and that love me. And just come to peace with the fact that I might not be able to make a huge difference. And sometimes just talking to who you love is the most important thing you can do, because it doesn't make it better, but it makes it kind of just a little bit easier to get through.
Yeah, and that really should be our focus right now, just taking things day by day and making things a little bit easier, just like you said. What do you think is the power of youth changing the world? Because you both started when you were really young, and you made so much change and thought in a different way than a lot of adults would. So what do you think is the power of youth changing the world and young people?
I would say for me particularly, were you about to?
Go for it.
Okay.
I want to hear your answer.
Yeah, so I think that youth are really in a unique position where I think that we're oftentimes more hopeful than other populations, slightly less jaded. And I wouldn't say that's because we don't recognize the harm that the world can have on people. But I think that oftentimes we're just a little bit more, let's get the movement going. We need to do it right now. This is urgent. We need to do this. And I think that there's this feeling of, kind of like power and excitement that a lot of youth can have when they engage with change making. And so I would say youth are kind of in this unique position because we have this quality of like excitement and willingness to act extremely quickly when we see something wrong. And that's been something that's gone on for years. There's been like many wars fought for social justice against aristocratic leaders, or there's been many movements that have been led by youth more recently that have really come together extremely quickly. And I think that is what's necessary right now. Things happen so quickly in our world, and especially right now. And there is a need for youth because of that quality of being able to act really quickly. And I think oftentimes older populations kind of have this idea that we need to slow down a little bit. And that's, generalization. Certainly there are many older people who have that ability to act really quickly. But there's this general consensus of like, we need to slow down, we need to think about this and really plan. And yes, that comes into account a lot, and that is really important. And sometimes it is more urgent than that, and it, you know, needs immediate planning and the kind of staying up until 2 a.m. to plan that rally type of action, or, you know, gathering at every single break and every single passing period so that you can do that protest tomorrow or whatever it is. That kind of sense of urgency, I think, is really common within the younger communities in our world. And so I would say that's come up a lot for me, and I would say that's the distinction that I feel a lot of youth have when making change.
I agree that young people tend to bring a lot more excitement to causes and have this really incredible ability to garner support for what they're passionate about and really bring people onto their side, especially considering that we can use social media and we have a really strong like mastery of that platform. And I think that a lot of young people don't realize how much power they have in terms of how much older people want to support them in their initiatives. So if we think about like this major trend right now in youth activism, there are also older people who love to see the next generation of young leaders taking charge. And they want to fund our projects, they want to support us, they want to mentor us and feel like they are a part of it. So I would say that we're really uniquely situated in that we can take advantage of that desire to help us and just create opportunities and accept help from older people. I think that once you reach a certain age, it gets harder and harder projects, but at the age that we're currently at, we can really take advantage of our status of being young to kind of show people how passionate we are about what we're working on, and then let people come onto our side and really like take advantage of their help.
And speaking of doing the things right now and kind of really pushing on that excitement and the momentum, our generation is really in the middle of a youthquake, young people changing the world, and a significant change arises from the action influence of young people, and it's been incredible to see. So what do you think is one thing that a person can do right now, today, to continue this momentum and make a difference, even amidst all of this?
I think right now, what I see as very pressing is, you know, we all know that I am very interested in education funding and working with that system. And the coming generations of kids into, you know, California school system and school systems all over the world are really going to be impacted by the government shifting funding more towards services that are more urgently needed because of our health crisis and also this financial crisis that we're in right now. And so right now, at least, working on, you know, those areas that we can, you know, we're not health professionals, we can't go into the world for that, but we can maybe work on areas that aren't being cared for as much. And I guess something you guys could do right now today is kind of reach out to the education funding organization that I've been working with, and they're looking for a bunch of, you know, youth volunteers looking to share their stories of how education and maybe a change in education funding has impacted them, or just generally how teachers have impacted you guys, anything relating to your school system. And so there's a bunch of organizations that are looking for youth to talk about their stories, because that really does appeal, like Julia was saying, to older generations who currently have more control over the systems that, you know, give that funding. And so that if you guys are interested, I'll be sharing that, or Hannah will be sharing that contact information with you guys. But that's one thing you can certainly get involved with right now. Could you guys like raise your hand or just say me if you guys live in California? I'm just confused where people are all from. Okay, you. All right. So everybody else is from somewhere else. Very cool. I'm just curious. Yeah. So if you guys are interested, that's a very specific thing, but definitely something that's necessary right now is how can we help those other services that are maybe not being prioritized right now for good reasons, but are definitely going to have an impact on younger generations to come. Yeah, true.
I think something we can always do is look to the community level to see what's already going on. So along the lines of what Michaela is saying, we don't always need to be the ones to start things, and we can also see what initiatives are already in place, especially I think if we're dealing with community, or if we're interested in supporting communities that we're unfamiliar with, we shouldn't always assume that we have the solutions and that we can go into these communities and save the day, but rather we can think about how we can be in solidarity with people who are struggling and empower voices that aren't always ours. And that tends to involve listening just as much as it does speaking up yourself, and maintaining a sense of humility and an openness to learning within your activism. The other main thing I'll say is that it's important to show up for whatever it is that you're passionate about. So thinking about my experience in college, I am constantly going to protests. Students are very passionate about everything from climate change to police brutality. So there's always stuff going on. But what makes those events work is when people actually show up to them. So I think it's important that if you care about a cause, you actually make the effort to get your body in the room and really just show up for the communities that are marginalized and struggling. And even thinking about my college experience, it's not always protest necessarily, but I've made it a priority to go to events to be in solidarity with the Black Student Alliance and with the Muslim Student Association and other student groups where I'm often the only Jewish person in the room. And I think that those are the most important rooms for me to be in, because my simple fact of being there is itself a demonstration of solidarity. So just thinking about how we can get our bodies into those rooms, regardless of whether we're talking or how actively we're contributing, just showing up is super important. And you all did that today, so good job. It's a good start.
For sure, passing on the mic is so important. So Henry asked, what specific parts of the education system are most in need of extra cash? Michaela.
I mean, the biggest one is teacher pay. If we're, getting into the nitty gritties, I think there's a lot of underfunding for personnel, and not even just teachers, but also other classified staff. So that's people like janitors, that's people like food service, people who work in food service, particularly special education personnel. That one's really important and oftentimes doesn't receive the amount of funding that's necessary. The crisis isn't as bad in other parts of the country, but California really suffers from it, and I know New York has a really difficult time with it, and certainly other areas as well. A lot of states kind of in the southern part of the US have a difficult time with funding their education system, and the biggest one is just how to make sure that we're paying the people who show up every day, to serve our students. So that's the biggest one in my opinion. I also think making sure that schools aren't just a place for learning, but also a place where like people physically and emotionally feel safe. We have a very big discrepancy between the support for white students and the support for students of color in our education system throughout California and the US. And so looking at, how can we provide enough funding for teachers so that they have the, time and resources to be able to make the school a safe space for everyone and a place to really learn for everyone. Yeah, so teacher pay and also all other classified staff is important.
Awesome. And last question, if you don't mind, if you could say something to yourself in the mirror every day, kind of like a mantra to yourself, what would it be?
I mean, be kind to yourself and to others. I guess, if you have to really pare it down to one thing, I guess that would be it. What we're talking about is a lot of activism at the kind of macro level, but I think it's just as important in our everyday relationships that we pay attention, we stay present, and are kind to our loved ones, our family members, doing what we can to take care of them, but also keeping in mind our own mental health and doing what we need to take care of ourselves.
I like to tell myself to be thoughtful about every interaction I have. I think that I'm, in my mind, like a very busy person. And so this is more specific to me, but something I try to tell myself every day is like, how can I be really thoughtful about every interaction I'm having and not try to adhere to what people expect me to say or how people expect me to act, but how can I really act in a way that's authentic and true to myself. And that takes like a lot of thinking and a lot of awareness and constantly coming back to, am I representing what I actually think, or am I representing what I feel people want me to say or how people want me to act?
That's amazing. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Does anyone else have any questions that they want to ask Michaela or Julie, or Julie, about their activism or anything? I want to ask, actually, how is Yale?
I love it. Yeah, I really enjoy it. It's the kind of place where everyone is really passionate about something, even if it's as obscure as like a particular kind of extinct bird. So it's really fun to be around people who are nerdy and love learning. And I just love college in general because I think it really gives you space to like grow into yourself, and you have a level of independence that allows you to kind of surprise yourself. And yeah, I'm a big fan.
For sure. I was definitely just curious. I'm from Canada, so we don't have like Ivy Leagues. So I was just wondering.
Oh, okay. That makes so much more sense now.
Yeah, because we don't get like inside information on that.
No, just that you're from Canada.
Oh,
yeah, okay.
Why does that make sense?
Do you have like this teeny tiny little accent, just like a teeny tiny one? And I was like trying to place which state in the US, and I was like, which one? But yeah.
Yep. Canada. Yes. Does anyone else have any other questions other than learning about Ivy League? Because yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Julie and Michaela, for sharing your point of view and sharing your story and your activism. And what you do is truly incredible. How can people find you, and how can people get involved with everything that you do?
Okay, so I can give you my email if you guys want to get in contact with me. And also, if you guys would like to check out Speak's website, the organization that I co-founded, I can send a link to you, Hannah, and then maybe it can be distributed, or I can also tell you what it is right now. It's ahsstudentspeak.org. So yeah, I'm maybe somehow sent to you guys, or I could actually. AHS Students Speak. Oh no, there's two S's between students and speak. I can put it in here.
Cool. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and then if you guys want to reach out to me, I'm like happy to talk about anything, or activism, or like politics, or finance, or whatever it is. I'm very interested in a lot of different things. Mostly those two. So my email is michaelakmw@gmail.com. And
yes, thank you. And Julie.
Yeah, so I'll drop my email in the chat for my project. If you're interested or involved in the special needs community, or you know special needs siblings that might benefit from the comic book, you can go ahead and send me an address, and I'll send you copies of the comic book for free. You can if you'd like, or read it yourself. And beyond that, if you're interested in connecting about anything, or you have a project idea maybe that you want to develop a little further, or maybe you would just want a little more motivation to get started on something, then I'm your person. So feel free to email me.
Amazing.
And yes, I do deliver outside the US.
Perfect. And you put your email in the chat. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on and for your information. I'm literally copying that right now. So amazing. Thank you for being on, sharing your story, and thanks everyone who hopped on. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for listening. It was wonderful talking and hearing the questions and responding. So thank you for listening and having us.
Yeah, for sure. And there's different JSER programs going on all day. And don't forget about our philanthropy project that we have going on, where we're fundraising for 4 different incredible organizations that are in need right now during the coronavirus crisis. So for everyone on here, don't forget about that. And you can check it out at bbyo.org/on-demand. Jill, I think that's the right link, because there's definitely a specific link for JSER. I'm definitely.
Yeah. So for the JSER programming, similar to this program, you can go to bbyo.org/on-demand. And if you want to participate in our philanthropy campaign, that is at givebutter.com/JSERV2020. Amanda, thank you for sending it in the chat. So far we've raised $1,500. So would love your support and love your help.
Woo! Amazing. Thank you so much, Jill, and thank you for putting it in. Appreciate it. And thanks to everyone that hopped on. Thank you again, Julie and Michaela, for being a part of the panel. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was fantastic.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, really appreciate you jumping on. And hopefully we'll find more opportunities to maybe connect with you for other things in the future.
Sounds good.
Yay. Cool. All right. I'm going to end the meeting. Okay. Bye.